In the extreme ice-bound regions of the Earth, something unprecedented is happening. Everywhere, glaciers and ice sheets have begun breaking apart and accelerating towards the oceans faster than ever imagined possible. How fast will the world's glaciers and ice sheets melt? And what will all that melting mean for us? Since the Industrial Revolution, our burning of fossil fuels has ratcheted up the output of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, which trap heat in the atmosphere. Temperatures are climbing, and the ice is melting faster than ever.
The real questions, the more complicated ones, are how fast are we going to get there? How much is it going to rise? Can we put the brakes on it at any point?
Over the last 40 years, temperatures here in Alaska have risen about 4 degrees Fahrenheit, twice as fast as the global average. Now, these rivers of ice are flowing faster and crashing even more spectacularly into the sea. Alaska's Columbia is one of the biggest ocean-feeding glaciers in North America. In the early 1980s, the Columbia started flowing faster. The Columbia is hemorrhaging ice so quickly that in the last 30 years, the glacier has receded 10 miles up the fjord. The consensus is that in the next 50 to 100 years, mountain glaciers almost everywhere will simply disappear. From the loss of mountain glaciers alone, sea levels will rise by almost a foot, displacing millions of people around the world. But the biggest cost will be the loss of these huge natural reservoirs of fresh water, water that 1/6 of the world's population depends on. The abrupt collapse of the world's mountain glaciers raises even more disturbing questions about the Earth's biggest tracts of ice. Global warming is hitting hardest in the Arctic, and all eyes are now fixed on Greenland's ice. Its next move could be the game changer for rising sea levels. Right now, greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere are even higher than they were 125,000 years ago. Higher than they've ever been in the last 500,000 years. Temperatures are already following suit.
There are concerns that we get to some point beyond which strong feedbacks in the climate system kick in and cause changes that we're really unprepared to deal with.
In the next 100 years, the oceans will expand on their own as they warm, accounting for about a foot of sea level rise. Another foot will likely come from the loss of the world's mountain glaciers as they melt away. The ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica won't disappear, but their combined melt is expected to add about another foot. The total equals an estimated sea level rise approaching 3 feet or 1 meter by about 2100. It may not sound like much, but over 100 million people live within 3 feet of sea level. Many island nations will cease to exist. The consequences will test our ability to adapt like never before.
In the worst case, if we are so foolish as to burn all the fossil fuels so that carbon dioxide increases to more than 1,000 parts per million, then there's no question we will melt all the ice on the planet, which would mean a 75-meter or almost 250-foot rise in sea level. It's not millennia. It's not going to take thousands of years. The forcing of humans is so large that it will do the whole job within a time scale of centuries, I believe. It would mean you simply can't inhabit the coastal areas because you will have a continually changing sea level. So we really do not want to go down that path.
Sea levels would rise by 16 feet per century. New Orleans could flood, followed by Miami. As southern Florida is lost to the sea, Other coastal regions will also struggle to hold back the tides.
We've already seen 7 inches of sea level rise in the bay over the past century. We know this because the longest continuously operating tide gauge in America is at the Golden Gate. So we have 154 years of data. We're just now beginning to realize with accelerated sea level rise, we're going to have to prepare and have a new plan for how we deal with it in the Bay Area.
The silver lining is the engineering will create so many jobs. Holding off the sea will be the major employer of the world by 2100, I think.
The bay's entire coastline would have to be defended with levees in order to protect it. But in the east, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta would remain vulnerable because it's at or below sea level. The Delta has some of America's most fertile farmland. If the Delta and its farmland were lost to the sea, California's food supply would be in jeopardy. The Delta is also one of the main sources of fresh water on the American West Coast.
26 million people drink water that comes from this estuary. If you raise sea level a foot, the work that we've done suggests that you will salt up this end of the delta, even if the levees all stay together, even if they don't fail.
Think of all the wharves and all the places where ships offload and unload all the goods and services. And if sea level rises even 3, 4, 5 feet, every single one of those ports has to be replaced. The cruise ship lines. There are billions of dollars of infrastructure that even a small sea level rise takes out. You got to rebuild it all over again.
After 4 feet of sea level rise, electricity supplies would be affected as coastal power plants are flooded. Sea level rise will happen. The question is not if, but how fast and how much our oceans will rise. Much will depend on our own CO2 emissions.